the Make Work Happen podcast, where we dive into the evolving world of IT and how leaders are shaping the future of their organizations. Today, we're going to tackle a critical topic, the strategic imperative of unified IT and making sure that you can actually simplify a lot of that complexity and making sure that you can future-proof your organizations moving forward. We know there's a lot of things happening out there in the world and more change is likely to come. And so we're going to dive into this topic today. And really the goal is to explore a little bit more why IT unification has become so critical and how to directly address some of those biggest challenges that we're seeing across IT leaders across the world, quite frankly. And to help out with this, we'll be drawing on some key findings from JumpCloud's latest IT trends report, fresh off the books, of where we're going to be diving into some of the data and start to understand what best in class and what other leaders are implementing. And then also with us today, I'm super excited to have joining us JumpCloud customer, partner, champion, overall amazing person, Ricky Jordan. Welcome, Ricky, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Well, as we start to dive into this topic, we'd love to, Ricky, give folks an audience a little bit more background on who you are and kind of how you operate within the world.
I'll intro almost 25 years in the IT game. I call it a game because it gives a little bit of gray hairs, but still keeps you young and happy and active and fun, right? Gives a lot of challenges. But with that noted, I've been in the MSP partner game, not necessarily with JumpCloud, but just IT consulting in general. Got into more of the SaaS management, SaaS side of items before COVID, pre-COVID. JumpCloud became a JumpCloud partner about 5 years ago. I have a full-time gig that was a retainer/contract turned full-time. So I'm a senior technology manager for that company, which is Primitive Skateboarding, aka Primitive Company. If you have kids with primitive shirts, that's going to be us. Still been running my consulting company, MSP company, 96 Firm. I got probably about 10 plus bread and butter accounts and clients, all on JumpCloud, all under the MTP or Managed Tenant Portal. And just here to talk JumpCloud because that's pretty much our mainframe and centralized platform for, my full-time gig, my customers, and even my own company, which I run to sub out, my subcontractors, things like that. They've got a JumpCloud account too. So definitely we can touch and talk JumpCloud today.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. And we're excited to dive into this topic. One of the first elements that we wanted to look at is really the cost and the problem around fragmentation that we are seeing across the industry. And it is a reality that a lot of IT leaders face. And one of the elements that we were able to pull from our research is we only found about 19% of organizations actually have a fully unified environment. So when you think about it, basically 1/5 of the IT environments out there feel that they are truly unified from that. And one of the other pieces that we're also looking at is just the sheer number of tools that it takes to operate in a modern organization. And we found that the average company is juggling right around 9 different tools just to operate their IT environment. And so I'd love to hear from your vantage point, what are some of the most pressing challenges or pain points that start to emerge from organizations when they live within this fragmented IT environment?
Sure. I will say it gives me a lot more potential for prospects and clients that are on the horizon to have something, have a solution, right? Have a solution I feel is affordable. Some people sometimes get blown away a little bit by the price because they didn't have a solution in place before. But when you start putting all the fragmented items of what that might cost by putting this solution with that solution with that solution, it drives them kind of nuts. So like, Ricky, okay, let's go back to that. I don't want to say one size fits all, but that solution, that unified solution, and go ahead and show us what it can do, right? So I will say that that's one thing that I truly value and respect about JumpCloud is it hasn't sat still for so many years. When I joined up with JumpCloud as a partner and as a customer on the retail side, the product was strictly pretty much directory with a little bit of a device agent for Mac and for PC. But now it's my MDM that I want to sell. It's my password manager I want to sell. We have, PAM on the horizon for things. We got asset management. There's so many puzzle pieces now that JumpCloud does, and they're not nickel and diming me either or my customers for that. So I can bring them this package that looks supercharged, and they didn't even think they needed these other puzzle pieces, right? So that's one thing on the unified. It's fragmented is everywhere. Like I said, it helps me sell my solution. My main bread and butter for me is not necessarily the software, it's my support. How available am I? How quickly do I turn around things? And I need those tools in the toolbox. And that's going to be JumpCloud as my number one foundational tool. I do support other platforms, but it still comes back to JumpCloud. That's one thing I push. That's one thing I support and I like to work with. So.
And I think that's a really interesting angle that you touched on is just the ability to maintain support for folks that, are not on JumpCloud, but there's a lot of different elements that you think about to maintain all those different tools that you need to. You have to training around it. You have to understand the SLAs around it. You have to make sure. And I think the worst part too is you start to think about where the data lives and how disparate it can be across some of those different types of fragmented. And that also kind of gives rise into the next, like I'd say, operational challenge that we hear a lot, that really ties into a lot of the strategic risks as well. And diving into the report, there's more and more security gaps that we have around that, especially around tool sprawl. And this was highlighted as one of the biggest problems that 56% that IT professionals ran into, is just kind of how disconnected that can be. And so I'm curious from your perspective, for the IT professionals out there that are managing kind of this environment, this fragmentation, what impact does that have for a team's ability to maintain control, address compliance concerns, or even have visibility across what's happening?
You hit the right thing. Visibility, everybody's, SOC, compliance, security. For me, visibility is everything. It's not a big brother thing, but I'll say, like, some of the more fun jobs or implementations I do, I have a couple tenants that might just be 15 users. I actually have a JumpCloud tenant of mine, or contract customer for the last 2 years on JumpCloud, that only has 6 users, but it's still a valuable product to them. And I still take just as much care and have just as much fun working with that. For one thing, think about it. We talk, let's say, shadow IT or sprawl or something like that. One thing that I go in for these more boutique, smaller firms that I might bring my solution, my services to, bring JumpCloud to, is somebody in-house try to do the IT position as best as possible, but then they leave and all that follows with them. Or they might have had old binder or something like that, or some type of thing of their processes. But, let's just use service accounts. Did they set up service accounts for the company? One user leaves and everything is married. They're Amazon for the company, staples.com. Everything is set up under that person's first and last name at the company's domain.com, right? So you kind of start there, or those passwords are all saved in a personal Gmail account in Chrome. So you come in and you got to disrupt the flow a lot, and that's very personable with somebody, and you don't want to step on toes, things like that. But you come in there to, I don't want to say clean house, but you come in there to sort things out, right? Clean it up, secure it, unify it, and give that transparency to the owner of the company, to the manager of the company, to the users of the company, that you're here to make their jobs easier and also to streamline their operations, right? SaaS management has been amazing. I underestimated the power of that product. It keeps growing. I'm such a big favorite. That's something I don't even push right away in my 5 to 10 minute demo for new prospects, because they're already in love with the directory. They're already in love with the device management. Then I bring that in, talk about conditional access, talk about SaaS management, like, hey, we can get the connector going for that. We can, I don't want to call the listener, but, whether it's the agent or JumpCloud Go, however it finds intel, like, hey, Susie, she left the company. She's an old former employee, and she had all these, she had a GPT account. She had a Grammarly account, things that we might not have known about. And you don't use it to get somebody in trouble necessarily, but they might not trust the IT department has that solution for them. Or even me as a contractor, they might be like, well, we have an external contractor guy. We don't want to bother him with like trying to find a solution, right? But I'll go ahead and get an email alert that, a whole department signed up for Grammarly. And whether or not that's paid or it's free, it's nice to know that that's there. And I can present it to the team, like I said, not to get in trouble. I don't want to be the bad guy, but be an asset to the company, grow my labor and value also, and help that company get in line, right? Like I said, it's not just 10 users or a smaller company. It could be on a bigger scope. Just take that nice experience I've had with smaller user count and take that on an SME or something, 500 plus users. My biggest tenant right now is we're knocking on the door about 850 users. It's a new tenant I took on board, and we're running all this just to collect the data, see what we've got. Then I can kind of quote out more what our contract and relationship is going to look like. But in a nutshell, that's a sprawl and fragmentation in today's time for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on a great point there too, where we often look at it from, this could be a security vulnerability. We're not necessarily trying to get people in trouble, but you hit on something that's really important, where it's like, it's actually much more of a strategic risk, right? It costs money when a whole department spins up either Grammarly or anything else. Another classic example is just kind of project management tooling, in Jira versus Monday.com, or kind of anything else where you don't have that visibility. And so therefore you start to have this fractured notion of, just the risk to the organization, even though there could be some security there, but it's more operational and just kind of making sure that you have that blocking and tackling. Well, and one of the things that has not come up yet, and so we wanted to bring that into the conversation, is to, I'd say, one of the more transformative topics. Everyone's talking about it, but I think the relationship that IT has with AI is very unique. And so I wanted to kind of bring that into the fold. And we actually found that our report unveiled that AI adoption across the board is booming. So we run this report every 6 months. We're kind of keeping this trend of what's happening across. And we've actually found that 99.6 organizations, so there's probably just a few folks out there that are not,
Just
but
a
they're
few.
all exploring and implementing AI and experimenting with it. And nearly 2/3 are really actively leveraging AI tools. And you mentioned ChatGPT, right? And there could be sanctioned versus unsanctioned tools. Could be, hey, we want
For sure.
everyone on Gemini, we want everyone on Perplexity. Whatever that might be, we want to make sure that we have that. One of the other elements that we found, especially when we look at, I'd say, the cohort of organizations that feel like they have a unified IT environment, is they feel that they're actually able to leverage AI to the fullest experience, right? And kind of understand that. I'm curious how you think about an organization's ability to roll out, whether it could be AI, where it could be any other type of new technology or something that allows them to take advantage of the marketplace. How does that sit in terms of how you think about not only the adoption, but then also the priority that you give it to security teams?
For me, transparency is going to be everything. Like JumpCloud, a lot of people talk about it on the onboarding and offboarding side. So for me, I'm very personable, whether I'm training an HR department, managers for onboarding, but I still start early. Like, how's your welcome email? How's your welcome packet? How do you discuss what tools we already have? What's in use? What if we don't have that in the toolbox? How do you suggest a request? I always start there. That way, we're not going to have every shiny tool in that box. I'd love to say I'm perfect. There's perfection. I'm 42 years old. A lot of my mentors have told me, do not chase perfection, do the best you can for the day, right? So for me, I look at how can AI, what does AI need to do for the company, first of all? What does it need to do for the end user? So, for example, for me, how can I scale my business and be a better MSP for my clients, take on more clientele and accounts, whether I'm hiring more subcontractors, employees, or techs on the thing? What can I do? I'm gonna work smarter, not harder, guys. So for me, AI and JumpCloud's been doing this very well. Is think about it, AI to me is the core. Is what do you want AI to be built on? Once again, it's a foundational item. What type of worker, let's just say, is AI? Is it going to be the guy that just data scrubs for you? Is it going to be the guy that does alerting? Is it going to be the guy that or gal or anybody in today's time that does development for you? What is it going to think? Is it going to be Ricky's brain, in a year from now, learning how I process things and suggest, Ricky, you're not offering this service, things like that. AI to me with JumpCloud is that core. I can see it being in my multi-tenant portal as an MSP and tell me, hey, Rick, this client or this tenant is not using commands very often. Maybe you should use that to your best ability. Hey, you're not using password manager. You kind of see those things. But let's take it another step. Is JumpCloud brought out alerting? And JumpCloud reminds me about Apple a little bit. Kind of, you guys sit a little bit in a certain area, but then you come out with that product and that feature, and you're killing it with it, right? So AI, think about the AI search. I kind of underestimated the power of AI search in JumpCloud, and I'm still doing these things where I've got to go to the device tab, go search for software, or run a command for how many computers have CrowdStrike. This way I can make sure maintenance is done and everything else CrowdStrike. I simply can type in the AI search, say Mac computers that have CrowdStrike installed, and it's going to go ahead and query a report for me, bring everything down in there. I can export as the CSV, whatever I want to do with it. You could take the next level. You can create webhooks out of it. You can create automations out of it. It's workflows out of it. You just think about what can that do for me to either save time, save money, be more available for a client, or set something that works after hours in case there's a bad alert like, hey, this is the wrong behavior for this user or this department that never logs in outside the United States. Let's go ahead and put a conditional access policy in place to block them from that specific country or something like that. AI is just growing and being smart, but that's JumpCloud is doing it right in that area. That's to me what AI is meaning for that, and it's It's not something that has been lacking in my area. I just had to understand where JumpCloud's vision is. Everyday AI, like I said, it's a buzzword, right? But it's way more than a buzzword when you use it in the right areas for that. A lot of my clients, Copilot, Gemini, whether it's Google or Microsoft, Slack clients, so you've got all these
Mhm.
AIs in different areas, Zoom, things like that. But if you can get everything to gist and do its thing, you got, once again, you're building a department and soldiers in a way that are growing with you. And then you're learning new ways to have them assist with you, or hey, have them offload things from you, right? So
Absolutely. And you hit on a great point too in terms of where that can go and how, at the core of it, you also want the human aspect, right? Making sure that you can
yes,
operate folks,
yes,
making sure that they are leveraging AI to their best of abilities. And I think one of the more interesting pieces is IT leaders across the globe, they have this magical moment right now in terms of being able
yes,
to enable AI for organizations, but then also act as a little bit more of a governor when you start to think about how we want to implement that. What does that look like? And one of the other elements that we found within the trends report is kind of this comparison and notion of really around the security aspects of it. There's this notion
yes,
non-human identities has come up quite a bit in terms of, it's very corollary to AI and understanding how do you think about this entity, this identity, right? That isn't mapped to a
hmm,
flesh and bone type of person, but
sure,
it's carrying out tasks. It's having some of these other pieces. And one of the biggest concerns that we've found from organizations that didn't feel like their IT systems were unified and they're a little bit more disconnected is their concerns for non-human access and really kind of thinking about this notion that identity is the new security perimeter, right? Whether it's flesh and bone or whether it's
sure.
robotic, it's really centering around that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how do you think about non-human identities as you think about, what this takes on? Is this a major security risk, or how should organizations be thinking about this?
I take it old school in this area where I've been on the JumpCloud platform for over 5 years now for most of my larger tenants. You still start old school personable, right? I want to have that directory in place. I want to have the device, and that's all manual processes, right? So if I bring in a non-human identity into my JC environment or JumpCloud environment, or even some of my other tenants, if I or vendors for say, let's say bring it into Microsoft or Slack and it starts doing things. Slack carries a lot of company data, right?
Mhm.
Microsoft or Google is going to have a lot of your email data or your Drive data or SharePoint data. If I can understand how, when these items are accessing it, the habits of it, and oversee it, having that foundation that I put in place 5 years ago and working with a vendor like JumpCloud that is innovating and also is linked up not just with Google or with Microsoft, but has this great portfolio of these vendors that it works with, whether it's through API or some other way, you can bring this environment, but like I said, still going old school where you're still thinking basics, identity, you're thinking device, and you're thinking access. So you have to, because if we go through the Terminator era, which who knows, I'm not a future guy, but I get a lot of clients ask me, are we going to go through the Terminator era, Ricky? Like, how do you feel about it? How are we going to protect ourselves from that? You need to be able to, we bring it back to service accounts. Who's the most privileged master user account is still going to be me, at least for my tenants, unless you get an in-house IT department or something else that's got a sort of daisy chain. But somehow the governor or the cut access off, it is there if you need a kill switch. If for some reason something's been trained like that, we can definitely go in that crazy fantasy world like an HBO documentary or something in the future. But you still need to have those I don't want to say kill switches, those switch consoles, right? You got to
Mhm.
still have some process and framework in place for that. Not necessarily for when stuff burns down. Hopefully it never does, but it's just, once again, you need to have documentation. You need to have that process. You need to have the vision in place for it. Then you can have the fun and automate it and go where and then you can view everything, right? You oversee who and what is accessing things.
Absolutely. And I agree. And I think that's one of those pieces where constantly talk to folks and leaders within the space. Whereas if you feel that you have a good, it's a unified approach, secure approach to identity management now, your baseline for managing any type of identity moving forward is so much
Yes.
stronger because you're
Yes.
thinking about, well, who had access to what? Who gave them in the first place? Is that reportable? Is it audible? Coming back to your notion, like, do we have kill switches? Do we have humans in the loop that are smart enough to understand kind of what's going on? But then also allowing that type of automation to have you scale, right? Making sure that you can
Sure.
approach because it can be also beneficial, making sure that you have your security baselines, your policies added automatically, all those different elements where it should be carrying out those different elements, but we also want to make sure it is also not nefarious and kind of acting like it.
I agree. Yeah, I like to do a lot of documentation. I said old school, but like a lot, all my prospects, all of my clients, I should just say my portfolio at the time, we all put a document together, whether it's an org chart for your tech, right? How does tech start? Where does it start? What does it touch? What's all automated? What is all unmanaged? How is it secure? What's your backup and recovery plan? You still have some type of ledger or manual somehow. Hopefully you do, whether it's here or on paper, where you have this mapped out, because you have to have some type of game plan to implement the product and also continue to manage and grow with the product, right? You still have to have that. You go to a hotel and you got the escape plan, right? You got a little map and stuff like that. So you got to still do that in a way for tech, but
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually dovetails nicely into one of the next pieces that wanted to, where you can guide yourself into, especially when you think about documentation and really the significant, let's say, operational benefits that you have from a lot of those other elements. One of the other elements we found within the report is that for organizations that are unified, they're going after this approach, they're making sure that they're streamlining as much as they can. They actually found that 70%, they report more improved strategic reporting and planning participation. And they say that the unification helps. And so I'd love to hear from, as you think about unifying all these different elements, has it allowed you to have more strategic conversations? Has it allowed you to make sure that your documentation is in place? Has it allowed you to making sure that you're, at the table when you need to be for those different types of decisions?
sure. Yeah, I will say, JumpCloud has helped me close the deal. Let's put it that way. I've grown a lot in the last 5 years, but also I haven't overworked myself to grow like that. It's just like I said, right tool, right time. COVID hit, people wanted remote, people wanted the visibility. But that unified experience for me is, I don't want to say I'm speaking a single language. I don't like to limit myself in the tech world. I'm always trying competitor products, other products. I like to see the trends that are out there. I like to play with new toys too. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean that's going to be my main. I'm a pretty big JumpCloud fanboy here in ways, but you guys got to keep on your toes and keep rolling with everything. But that unified side is when I do a demo, regardless if I'm pushing a product like Ignite, which I am a partner with for data, or reseller for Google or for Microsoft, or any other products out there, my demo will still start majority, even if they have a competitor directory product or another MDM provider, or they're using Intune with Microsoft on it. They're approaching me for some main reason, and a lot of that becomes down to unification, whether that's because of prior breach or because of prior pain points, current struggles, things like that. So if I've got JumpCloud connected to everything, devices, accounts, all the SSO logins for Adobe, for Slack, I keep mentioning all those names on
Mhm.
it. You've got JumpCloud's got the whole. It all cascades down from that. So if you onboard a user, whether you're importing them from Microsoft or Google or another HR product, or starting in JumpCloud and originating that user, everything that connects to it on a majority scale. A lot of my tenants are about 90% connected off of JumpCloud. So Zoom, Slack, Microsoft, all these apps start in JumpCloud. So you create the user in there. You can have a one-size-fits-all user group that automatically gives them Ignite, Slack, access, things like that. Set up automation for licensing. You can see when they access those apps, from what locations, from what device. So unification helps me because MFA is done through JumpCloud, or conditional access is done through it. The user is created there. They're assigned to devices, BYOD or company managed. So that unification, I literally can blow out that demo in 5-10 minutes because you don't want to overwhelm somebody. But then you're like, what doesn't this do? What questions do you have left for it? Then we can trickle down, go into the Ignite tenant or go into Microsoft tenant, give a demo of how everything works. But it's really that JumpCloud shines for it because it's got those items in there, or it's the traffic director for them, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. And you listed off a litany of applications, right? And I'm sure that everyone who's listening, and they can name that plus another 5, 10, 20 more that they're all thinking about. And one of the other elements is, how do we automate a lot of those different pieces? And we found, especially when we started asking about, okay, share of wallet, kind of some of the other pieces, 54% of organizations actually increase their investment in automation and understanding kind of how we can tie those different elements. And you can look at it from two two lenses, two sides of the case of understanding, well, I want cost optimization, which we kind of talked a little bit more,
Mhm.
but then also what does it allow you to do and kind of make some of those strategic investments if you're able to automate some of those other elements. And especially amongst, I'd say, our current economic climate, if you will, right? There's a
Sure,
lot
sure.
of different changes and other pieces. So I'd love to hear from you on kind of how are you leveraging that to make more strategic investments and not just on the cost optimization side.
Yeah, so I'll start this on my primitive side of things, where I'm not necessarily the partner selling, a product to somebody. I'm an IT director or manager or whatever we want to call it, one size fits all hat. And you got to still price shop. You got to look at things. There's obviously your things on your dream list, wish list, but I'm a big ROI person. It's not necessarily to replace bodies or automate things to replace other things out there. I like to be efficient. I like to be secure. And I'll just kind of use an example is even like warehousing software for me. It's not to replace bodies, but it's a lot of people are overworked, for example. How can we get a better pick, pack, ship solution that's on tablets instead of wasting paper and printing things out and having to have 3 shifts to do something one shift could do easily and still take a nice lunch and things like that. You know what I mean? So there's so many fun things that we could chat about on that. But I'm just going to go back to ROI is the jump cloud product value is there. So I have on the partner side, people come in, oh, I love jump cloud, but I need all those features, but X amount per user might be too much per month because they weren't paying that. So I
Mhm.
look at it as an ROI. Why did you come to me as a prospect? What are your pain points once again? Is it, oh, it takes you a week to onboard somebody? We can do that in less than an hour. Let's get them the device. We can get them on a BYOD. We can drop ship them a Mac or an iOS device or get them on a Windows device quickly. Do you have existing Windows devices? What is the value to that? I'm not necessarily taking it out of my pocket for not running the stopwatch as a consultant, going there and spending 4 hours, driving out, touching the computer, configuring it, setting up the user. The ROI there comes back to, wow, now JumpCloud is in our price range. Your services are in the price range. I can take on more clientele because it's so streamlined in that. So ROI is there, the value is there. You just got to get the prospect, or even myself at the time. I didn't know if it was going to be worth it 5 years ago, working for Primitive and giving JumpCloud my money, right? But I'm glad I did. Let's just say that it started a whole journey for me in many different ways. So, and it's nice because I don't have to sit here and work with a sales team for all these products. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like, I'm not working with a password manager sales team. Oh, I got this dreaded hour call that I've got to negotiate. We'll just call it the red company for design, where we got to negotiate that one every year and play around with that. JumpCloud is a fair company, number one, also. So it makes it easy that I can just branch everything off of that, right? It's just ROI. Let's stick with that one.
I love it. So as we start to wrap up our conversation, one of the other elements that we were thinking about, and it's cited a lot within the trends report and as well as other research what we did, is as you think about automating more, as you think about implementing AI more, one of the biggest, I'd say, missed opportunities that we're hearing from a lot of other IT leaders about, and this was one of the highest ones, about 40%, was automating those repetitive IT tasks that you talked about. How can we make sure that we have that, and also allowing the collaboration that we need between other departments to be successful, making sure that we can have meaningful conversations, making sure that you're showing up and having those strategic conversations with other departments, making sure that they can achieve their goals. And so there's a lot to go on there when you think about unwrapping all the different complexity, making sure that you're operating within a unified environment, as well as pulling in different areas, whether it's AI, security, non-human identities, you take your pick. There's a lot that's happening within the world. And so with that, kind of say the biggest question we got for you is, what would be your final advice for IT professionals and leaders that are listening in that are considering much more of this approach? What would be your biggest kind of takeaway and experience that you want them to have?
For that approach on it, it's kind of crazy because we have so many cool tools, whether we're talking AI or anything else. We've got more tools now as a tech department or as an MSP than we had even 5 years ago. There's just so many automation items, so many ways things link together on it. But what is the next step? You're always innovating. How do you take that to the next level? Because we're going to constantly keep getting more and more things, more and more expectations out of our clients, even if it's not on our original, scope sheet, right? They're going to be like, why didn't you proactively think about that? So for me, if you get things in the automated queue, I'd mentioned a little bit earlier, something like something as simple as, directory insights triggered an alert in JumpCloud saying, Susie's in, Portugal, she's never been outside of, California. What do you want to do? And you could also set it so you can approve that as an admin, or set it to automatically do something, right? You can do it as something as simple as that. How do we keep everything patched? Like, granted, JumpCloud has the automated side of it. The patch side keeps getting better and better with it. But how do we take it to the next level with AI or with automation, right? It's, you bring it back to the AI search or even your alerting. What if you have a report ran every day, and you need to keep Creative Cloud updated, or Ignite desktop app updated, weekly. Granted, yeah, the updates will run stuff, but what if you want to take it a step further, that, hey, we have this pesky machine for some reason, Ignite, for example, has not updated in over a month. What do you want it to do? Let's go ahead and automate that in JumpCloud to either run a command automatically, put it in a certain device group, maybe escalate permissions here. Whatever we need to do, why don't we use it for that? It's granted we can do all that manually. I could go run a report, go see things, go manually run commands, but am I billing for that? Do I want to spend that extra time? Does my client want an extra bill? Am I already exceeding my contract? I just want to do it and I'm wasting 2 more hours of my time just because I'm a good MSP for my client, but then I can't spend the time with my kids. That's what I'm saying. That's where the power of this side of it is. You want to workflow, innovate, automate, be smart about it. And I like I said, I see JumpCloud trending in that area with this, and that's such a big need. And that is my biggest need out of the JumpCloud product. You're very robust in so many areas. And I will say this, I want it to be on a mobile handheld device for admins. So that's kind of my wish list there for the Dream Theme side of it. Yeah, I'd like to just keep automating. Let's be smart about everything.
I think that's the biggest takeaway that we'll have across all of these is how can you think about automating smarter, making sure that you're working for you, making sure that you could do it securely. And so with that, Ricky, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and experiences today and kind of going through all these different notions that are impacting IT leaders today, from AI and complexity into security into anything else that might be happening in the rest of 2025 that we'll be looking at. And so for our listeners, I also encourage you to take a deeper dive into our IT trends report from JumpCloud, explore a little bit more of these findings. We just touched on a few of them, but there's plenty more there to uncover. And that's all for this episode of Make Work Happen. So thank you, and join us next time too as we continue and explore all the different strategies and insights into shaping the world of IT.